Class, thanks for joining us once again where people continue to be wrong on the interwebs. Today, we're learning about vegan logic. We're also, bonus, going to find out whether or not Dr. Anthony Chaffee this week got debunked completely by a vegan or whether he didn't. Stick around because here it comes, sort of now.
I was just eating vegetables like spinach, kale, broccoli, and just meat. And just by dropping the spinach, kale, and broccoli, I lost 10 kilos in 10 days. And so, it was just came right off me. And I was eating more calories. I was eating much more meat. I started eating a lot more meat, a lot more fatty meat. So I probably quintupled my calories, but I lost 10 kilos.
This man claims to have simply dropped spinach, kale, and broccoli from his diet, but then probably quintupled his calories and then lost 10 kilograms or 22 pounds. Just what?
The echo is incredible here, isn't it? That's what Anthony just said. We heard him. The vegan people feel they need to repeat things in veganese or something so that vegan people can understand? Or is it that you need to hear things more than once to catch on to some pretty simple messages?
Hey, what is going on, guys? So today we're going to be starting a new series titled Worst of the Carnivores. I say kind of because I've already done a video on the carnivore doctor, Shawn Baker, which technically falls under the goals for this series, so I recently renamed it to fit the series. If it wasn't obvious, in this series we will be investigating various claims made by specific carnivore influencers.
Or indeed, things that you claim people have claimed, where you've taken snippets of things they've said out of context. You haven't played the whole message. You've basically set up straw men.
Whether they have any merit, how they stand up to the scientific literature.
Oh, well, hang on a minute there, Charlie Brown. What would qualify you to comment on whether something does or does not stand up to the scientific literature? What qualifies you to read scientific literature with any degree of competence? How many statistical analyses have you yourself conducted and had published in peer-reviewed journals as first author? How many times have you planned, executed a major research program? What advanced research degrees do you hold? Or are you a bloke with an opinion? Let's see. I did look to see whether I could find any evidence of advanced research participation or competence to speak on the scientific literature in any way. I could not find it for this boy.
And more. Today's episode will be on Anthony Chaffee, a very prominent figure in the carnivore movement. At the time that I'm filming this video, he has 165,000 YouTube subscribers and 154,000 followers on Instagram. According to his YouTube channel, he is an American medical doctor and neurosurgical resident. Let's now investigate some of the claims he's made. We'll start with his video titled,
or indeed claims that you claim he's made by altering what he actually was saying in context to make it look like he's saying something you want him to be saying. Okay.
Dr. Anthony Chaffee, plants are trying to kill you. Now,
yeah, that's a clickbaity title for a YouTube-y type video. You want to take it absolutely literally? Well, you're not getting off to a great start because I thought you were going to talk to us about the science underpinning claims that Anthony Chaffee has actually made. The title of the video is not a claim, son. Okay? It's the thing that people use to try and get people to click it so that they'll view it. All right?
Before we get into the video, I will say that given we have no good reasons to think that plants are sentient, I find it hard to fathom how they could even possess intentional states.
Oh my God, really? That's what we're dealing with here, kids, by the way. So if you get it already, you get it. But stick around to the end anyway, because there'll be a massive bonus at the end of the video at some point.
So when he says plants are trying to kill you, I'm very confused.
But yes, it's clear that you are, son. But can we move on to some science, perhaps, about anything that Anthony Chaffee has actually had to say of substance on any topic?
Anyway, let's give this video a watch.
So let's take a think about this. Okay, so just Botany 101, plants are living organisms and they like to stay living organisms. If you eat them, they die. And so they have defenses just like any other living organism. And while animals can run away or fight back, plants can't. And so they use a lot of different things, but poison is one of their main deterrents. They use these defense chemicals to poison the animals that are trying to eat them, and they have hundreds of different ones.
Now, this whole idea is very interesting because some plants, like fruits, spread by us consuming their seeds and spreading them about. So for some plants, being eaten is actually the way in which they spread their seed.
Yeah. So?
Quite literally, which of course...
So? that doesn't refute what Anthony has just said, which was correct. I think it's 98% plus, don't quote me on the exact number, of plants contain toxins known to have adverse effects in the human body, up to and including death. That is a fact.
Of course, spreads the existence of their species. So even if you want to pretend like plants have a kind of intentional state, I wonder...
No, you put that there as a straw man. That's just Anthony's clickbait title to the video. That's not a claim still.
Anthony Chaffee thinks that, okay, maybe we should just eat fruits because, we're doing them a favor too, right? We're helping them spread.
This is why most plants in the world are inedible. We sort of know this intuitively. If you got lost in the woods here and you ran out of food, you wouldn't be able to eat any random plant. Most of them would make you very sick.
Yeah, so while it is true that most plants in the wild are too toxic for us to consume, the good news is we know which ones aren't. So we eat those. Amazing. It's almost as though the means by which the typical person
immediately toxic, fatally toxic, or seriously toxic is very, very different, isn't it, from a little bit toxic per serve, hardly toxic at all per serve, but cumulatively toxic over years and years. You're not making any point here, son.
Person procures plant foods is in a grocery store where edible plants are sold, as opposed to a jungle where the majority of plants are poisonous. Crazy.
Right. So what you're saying is veganism is a completely unnatural lifestyle and it has to be facilitated by modern technology. Otherwise, it does not work. Okay.
Easy stuff here, guys. There are also animals that are very toxic to eat.
Sure, of course.
Like poison dart frogs, pufferfish, blister beetles, Greenland sharks, animal products too, like bear liver. There's also the blue-ringed octopus and many more. But just like people who eat plant foods, people who eat animal foods don't consume the animal foods that are very harmful for us at very low doses.
Well, some do. Ever heard of fugu? I wouldn't go there myself.
Most water is undrinkable.
Sure.
But this doesn't mean don't drink water. It means drink the water that is drinkable and don't drink the water that is undrinkable. I hope you guys are able to keep up with these super in-depth rebuttals.
Well, I hope they get more in-depth than this, son, because basically what you're doing is you're giving us your opinion about a clickbait title and you're not dealing with anything that's actually been said at all, or refuting anything that's been said at all, or debunking anything that's actually been said at all. What Anthony Chaffee has said hitherto thus far in his video that you've allowed him to say is that almost every plant on the planet contains toxins, most of which will make a person very, very ill or dead, which is a fact still. What's next?
Again, just Botany, Biology 101. I literally learned this in 7th grade that...
Literally the most overused word in the English language.
Plants and animals are in an evolutionary arms race. Plants becoming more and more poisonous so less and less animals can eat them so that they can survive and thrive. And animals becoming more and more adapted to the specific poisons in specific plants so that they can eat that plant and survive and thrive. And this is where they get their dedicated food resources. It's like koalas and pandas, they eat a very specific diet. They eat other plants, they will get very sick.
Wait. So you're telling me that certain animals consume plant foods that are not poisonous to them and avoid the ones that are?
Yes, certain animals do that. That's a strategy that is known about in nature. Yes. So what?
Sounds very familiar. I wonder if humans do that?
Not humans that know what's good for them. No. Plant materials are not, for want of a better term, designed for human consumption. More like, actually, the human body is not designed, for want of a better term, to consume plants. We used to, around 5 million years ago, but then there was a divergence evolution-wise. We left that pathway. We came down from the trees. We stood upright. We went, oh, look at those tasty megafauna. I wonder if, oh, no, we don't have sharp, pointy teeth. That's the end of our carnivory. Or we could sharpen some sticks and throw some stones and make a lot of noise and work together as a band and plan and use intelligence and our ability to communicate and such. Like, all that works. Good. Let's do that for the next 5 million years or so and evolve into humans. Goodness gracious.
No, we don't do that.
Well, very foolish humans do that. Yes. But so what? Just because somebody does something, that doesn't mean that that thing is a good idea. Veganism, for example, not a good idea. Clearly, patently.
The way I came to the way of eating that I do, which is really just meat and water, is 22 years ago, when I was taking cancer biology at the University of Washington in Seattle, we went over how plants use defense chemicals in order to defend themselves. But we were looking at this from a cancer perspective. So we were looking at carcinogens. And we learned 20 years ago that Brussels sprouts alone had over 136 identified human carcinogens in them.
Yeah, okay, this is an interesting area with carcinogenicity, etc. And I say that because anytime anybody appends a label of carcinogenic to a food-borne chemical, they are taking a leap of faith, because there is no experimental evidence to underpin that claim extant. The only thing that will exist is an associative data set, for which I will have several questions. 1. What was the sample size and person years of follow-up? 2. What, if any, control was exerted before data collection began on that population? Who were that population? What was the baseline incidence? What was the incidence at the other end of the spectrum of intakes with respect to this particular carcinogen? Was the data set adjusted, i.e. fabricated in any way? What was the value of the R squared that they managed to get the trend line down to after they have fabricated? And we could go on and have a look at the thing all day, and what we would have to assert is there is an association perhaps of a certain value or strength, but there is no evidence of cause and effect, and carcinogenic is a cause and effect statement. Okay, so no, potential carcinogens would be the appropriate terminology scientifically here.
Alrighty, guys. So Anthony's source for this claim is my cancer biology class from university 22 years ago.
So he is suggesting that there are chemicals that exist in plants which are thought by some people to have a role in cancer. That is also a fact. He is outlining a theory. He is not attempting to prove a case. He is putting together an educational video for lay people to view.
Sorry, but I'm going to need a more reliable source to support the claim that Brussels sprouts contain 136 carcinogens. It's also...
Well, there isn't one. It doesn't exist.
So unclear how he's classifying carcinogens here.
Exactly. See this here on the screen right here, right now? Those are opinions, aren't they? They are classifications, which is an opinion, by the IRAC and authority. So what we also have here is appeal to authority fallacy, as well as nothing more than somebody's opinion. None of it is underpinned by experimental works on human beings to determine who does and doesn't get cancer. Okay? Discipline is what science is about. You have to be clear about your message and speak the truth about how your message can be supported.
According to the IARC, or the International Agency for Research on Cancer, there are only 127 carcinogens categorized as Group 1 carcinogens.
Who cares? So what?
1 carcinogens are considered carcinogenic to humans.
Who cares what the consideration is? That's an opinion. That's not science. Science is underpinned by empirical data sets, experimentally collected, under discipline.
And Chaffee said Brussels sprouts alone have 136 identified human carcinogens in them. Now, clearly it can't be that all 136 of these carcinogens are considered carcinogenic to humans if we're operating under the IRC's classification system.
Why would we do that? That's an appeal to authority fallacy. Who cares what their ideas are?
And remember, we're being quite charitable here. Because
no, you're not. You're being an arrogant little boy, speaking well outside his area of expertise, competence. You are not a scientist. You have no peer-reviewed publications of any kind behind your name. You have never undertaken a statistical analysis for publication, as far as I can tell. You are a boy with an opinion. That's not charity. That's arrogance.
Let's not forget what his source was for this claim. My cancer biology class from 22 years ago. It would
brain fog much with the repetition? We heard you the first time.
It'd be nice if he cited a paper to review, but...
Why? Would you be able to competently look at a paper and work out what it says, doesn't say, and find the faults, flaws, and foibles in it, son? I'm picking not. You're invited to come and have a debate with me, if you like, sunshine, on some topic of nutrition science, veganism versus not, or something. You propose a moot to me. Send me an email, propose a moot. We'll do it live on camera, and we'll see just how clever you are then, won't we? I'm picking you'll run away with excrement in your trousers, as these brave individuals always tend to do when they're offered a cross-examination from yours truly. Anyway, the invitation stands. I shall not wait with bated breath.
He didn't. Lastly, if we're going to use the IARC rankings,
why would we still?
Chaffee would have to admit that processed meat, like bacon, is a carcinogen, not just a carcinogen.
No, he wouldn't. He wouldn't have to do any such thing. He's not talking about some claimed authority, explicitly or specifically naming anyone. You did, not him. He said, as a concept, that there are a number of substances identified in a given plant-based so-called food substance, which are thought to be involved in the cancer process. He said carcinogen, which was ill-advised, but nonetheless, he's not talking at the level that you're trying to debunk him at. He's outlining his theology before he gets into talking about any actual science. Maybe calm down a bit and wait for him to actually get to the meat and potatoes of the matter.
Carcinogen, a group 1 carcinogen, meaning it is carcinogenic to humans.
No, that doesn't mean that. It means that's the label they've appended according to their opinion on it. It's not underpinned by experimental evidence to prove it. It's an idea. Who cares? Let's move on.
And why I'm mentioning this will be made clear in the next clip.
And that,
well, we hope so.
just, white cat, I'm telling you, this is why kids, no one likes Brussels sprouts, right? And that's why, right? That bad taste, that bitter taste is your brain and your tongue, which are sophisticated machines, and they can tell you like, hey, this is bad for you, spit it out. So if and that's what we would normally naturally do as a kid. So you give an infant a piece of broccoli, they will hate you for it. You give them a piece of bacon, and their eyes light up, right? So,
especially if it's cured with sugar, I don't know.
Okay, so first of all, when I was a kid, there were many times where I would opt for broccoli over things like meat. So does that mean that broccoli is now all of a sudden healthier than meat? These are all just, anecdotes of children making decisions. We shouldn't be using what children do to determine if a food is healthy.
Okay, so anecdotes are of no value. I agree. Should we move on? This is just part of Anthony's speech at the time. It was about getting a bit of amusement going and a bit of engagement going so that he could keep the attention of his audience. What's the problem?
Secondly, he's just claiming that the reason kids choose to not eat vegetables is the body knowing about these defense chemicals. Did he provide...
He's suggesting that's a possibility, and it is. Can you prove him wrong? With perhaps a peer-reviewed piece of literature or two that you have competently analysed yourself and are able to defend? No? I thought not. So you're just giving us your opinion then. That's not debunking. That's just giving us your opinion. What's next?
Evidence for this claim, which, by the way, is a very bold one. No, he didn't. He just made the claim. Because...
Hypocrisy alert. A vegan claiming that someone just says things without backing them up because they want to.
As I didn't want to consume red meat as a kid, can I just baselessly make the claim that the reason I didn't want the red meat and wanted the broccoli instead is because my body knew that the red meat was bad for me? Of course not. And here's the irony and why I mentioned bacon earlier. He's implying that bacon must be good since the kid he spoke of would choose bacon. And he is fear-mongering over the carcinogens in Brussels sprouts when we know bacon is a group 1 carcinogen.
No, we don't. That's somebody's opinion still, and it still isn't underpinned by any evidence or data of any kind. It's an authority position statement, and it's false.
Amazing. And to make this even more amazing, processed meat, which includes bacon, is associated with an increased risk of total cardiovascular and cancer mortality.
No, it isn't, in fact. Number one, that data set was adjusted, ergo fabricated. It is not an observation of any population of people and their outcomes in response to any given input. It is not controlled in any way, shape, or form prior to data collection. The population was aged at the beginning of the follow-up observation period, ergo had a milieu, many, many decades of factors playing into their heart health outcomes, and as such was completely confounded by covariates, by confounders, by collinearities, and as such leads us to the absolutely inescapable conclusion that we have a so-called associative data set here, fabricated association, so not even in the real world. And even if it was correct, which it isn't because it's been fabricated, it's an associative data set, ergo incapable of informing on cause and effect. Risk is a cause and effect statement, ergo you have just fallen over your own feet and landed flat on your nose. Whoops. That's why you're invited to come and debate science with me, Sunshine. Okay? So no, your associative data set is A, fabricated, and B, cannot inform on causality. Risk is a cause and effect inference statement. No.
Oh, but dude, who cares? Because, kids choose bacon over broccoli, so it must be healthier.
No, he didn't say that. He made an inference, but he didn't actually claim that. You're setting up straw men and making errors in attempting to knock them over. Your straw response is even more flimsy than the straw man.
Jokes aside, can we please not use what children want to eat to help figure out what is healthy for us? If it were solely up to me as a child, I would want to eat donuts and ice cream all day over broccoli, red meat, and other more whole foods. This is just a ridiculous point. Children's preferences can also vary based on culture, or even their parents' preferences. Now with all this fear-mongering over
Do you have anything to say of any actual substance in this video? I'm starting to doubt it.
cruciferous vegetables like Brussels sprouts and cancer, let's take a look at data involving the consumption of these vegetables and health outcomes.
No, data concerning what people report they have consumed and health outcomes. Under no control whatsoever, and the report which you're about to give us will be an adjusted, i.e. fabricated association, which even if it wasn't fabricated and was the actual association observed in the real world at the time, it will be on a population of aged individuals, and it will be associative and not a cause and effect artifact.
This umbrella review on cruciferous vegetable consumption.
A review article, well, that's somebody's opinion. Science is done experimentally, not by review.
Which includes Brussels sprouts, of 41 systematic reviews and meta-analysis of 303 observational studies found that cruciferous vegetable intake may be associated.
Maybe. See that word? Maybe? It means maybe not is entirely on the table still. So we have a worthless waffle here. This is why you need to come and just debate science with me, son, because you're not competent, and I will tear you 7 new anal orifices to make the point, to educate people, to be a bit more discerning about who it is they listen to for their information about what science is. Because you have no idea. You think this is good science and that you're proving something here. No, son, you're making a laughingstock of yourself.
With beneficial effects on several health-related outcomes.
Beneficial effects is a cause and effect statement. It cannot be underpinned by the data in any associative data set of any size,
including gastric cancer, lung cancer, endometrial cancer, and all-cause mortality. This paper, which includes a meta-analysis of 26 cohort studies, found that higher...
So another associative work that's been fabricated and is on a specific population and is associative and not cause and effect. And this is confounded to bits.
Intakes of fruit and vegetables were associated with lower mortality. And this...
No. No, have a look at this, for goodness sake, in terms of the magnitude of the effects here. Any competent reader on the statistics will tell you that the absolute magnitude of any so-called effect here, so close to zero as makes no odds for any one given living human being over a 100-year lifespan. And it's adjusted. So it's a fabrication. It's falsehood. And you're a gullible, young individual with way too much self-confidence and arrogance and not remotely enough experience and competence who ought to remain silent on these issues, at least until you have sufficient knowledge in the field to actually put forward an authoritative position. You don't have that. There is no credence behind anything you are saying here.
Paper included subgroups of vegetables like cruciferous vegetables. But dude, the kid didn't choose the Brussels sprouts.
Yes, okay, you're really laboring this point. It was a quick throw-out bit of comedy from Anthony Chaffee. So what? Do you have anything of substance to pull him up on here?
He wanted the bacon, so never mind. Screw all that data.
What data? A pile of worthless data is just that. It's a pile of worthless data. There is no meaningful, valid data that we can look at regarding cause and effect, hard health outcome of any kind, and nutritional input of any kind over any period of time in any group of human beings. These studies do not exist and they never will. What we have here is theology, propaganda, smoke and mirrors, pseudoscience practice, and foolishness of the highest order.
Yeah, so we were learning that white cap mushrooms had over 100 known carcinogens, but also spinach, kale, lettuce, celery, cabbage, cucumber, broccoli, literally given pages and pages of every plant that you've ever come across in the grocery store. and not a single one had less than 60 known human carcinogens in them.
Thought to be carcinogens. Okay, we really need to be very careful with this.
Yeah, so again, we're going to need a source for this claim. And
Why? Why do you need a source for that claim? Is Anthony Chaffee writing a thesis? No, he's giving a public engagement speech to lay people, I believe. There are no papers that can inform on cancer outcomes, cause and effect. These studies do not exist. We have weak at best associations on groups of people that are so far confounded as to be laughable. We do not have science on this. We have theology still.
to start with one of these grocery items. What are the 60 or more carcinogens found in a carrot? Are they group 1 carcinogens? What dosage are they present in? Do
Who cares about any of that?
these dosages reach a carcinogenic or toxic threshold?
Well, what is that? And what would qualify you to speak on the science of cancer in any way?
And if not a single plant you can find in a grocery store has less than 60 known human carcinogens, and this is something we should care about, why do we see health outcomes like this?
So some more prospective cohort associative studies that prove nothing whatsoever, and flash it up on the screen for fewer seconds than we can actually even read what paper it is, and we'd have to go back and look to find it, to find out that it's an associative, ill-disciplined, uncontrolled mishmash of pseudoscience and inappropriate verbiage. Okay.
We were quite taken aback by this, obviously. We were very, very shocked, as some of you may be right now. And I remember thinking in my head, I'm like, well, but vegetables are still good for you though, right?
No, wrong. And Anthony knows that.
And our professor must have just read our minds. He looked at us like, you guys aren't getting this. And he just said, I don't eat salads. I don't eat vegetables. I don't let my kids eat vegetables. Plants are trying to kill you.
Right, so that's where the clickbait title of the video came from. He's quoting somebody else on their opinion. Wow.
So I was like, right, forget plants. And I just stopped. And you go to the grocery store and everything has plants, right? Everything's either is plants or...
Except meat and associated fat. That doesn't have plants in it.
Has plants in the ingredients. And I just walked around and I just came across it's eggs and meat. I'm like, okay, well, I just eat eggs and meat. And that's what I did for a number of years and had massive health benefits. I was playing professional rugby while in university, and my athletic performance, as well as just my physical health, just increased dramatically. It was just night and day difference. And again, still feeling those positive results 22 years later.
Okay, guys, Chaffee heard his professor just say plants are trying to kill you. I don't eat salads, and I don't feed my kids vegetables, along with this apparent info on carcinogens in plants, which again, he hasn't properly cited yet. And then boom, he decides to stop eating plants.
Yeah, that's what he said. Again, the echo is pretty good here, isn't it? He then suffixed that with his anecdote that, and having done so, his health improved incredibly and has remained incredibly improved for 22 years. If you're looking for science, nutrition versus hard health outcome, you're going to be looking all day, boys and girls. It doesn't exist still. It's a good story, though, from Anthony Chaffee, and it's one that I tend to accept as being likely to be true. I myself have consumed a largely carnivorous diet for approaching 9 years, and I too can report vast health improvements and pretty much a maintenance of those health improvements over that period. So N equals 2. And you go and look around and find some more anecdotes, and it turns out there's millions of them. Millions of people eating a carnivore diet these days. It's all the rage, which is great because it's actually how we have evolved. It's how we are imagined by nature to actually gain our nutrition by eating animals. But okay, tell us all about science, and I'll put you right where you get that wrong, which will be everywhere.
This decision-making process gives us good insight as to what Chaffee's epistemic standards are. Truly brilliant.
No, it gives you no insight of any kind into anything except this particular public engagement event that Anthony Chaffee is speaking at. We don't even know what the purpose of the meeting was. We've already seen what your epistemic standards are, and they are you are working from a standpoint of having absolutely no grasp or understanding of science, the disciplines of science, the scientific process, cause and effect, evidentiary standards, or anything remotely similar. Unsurprising, considering you have exactly no peer-reviewed publications of your own in any topic, as far as I can tell, and neither have you ever undertaken any statistical analyses for publication either. So it's not surprising that you don't know anything about this. What is surprising is that you don't understand that. That's the Dunning-Kruger, and that at the end of the day, what you really ought to be doing on this topic is remaining silent because you're ignorant. You have no basis to speak on this topic. You have no standing here. What's next?
Screw looking at health outcomes, suggesting that specific plant foods can actually lead to good health outcomes.
See, lead to cause and effect statement cannot be supported by any data extant anywhere in the literature today or into the future, ever.
My professor 22 years ago just said something.
Yes. He said that. We heard him. Still.
Something, plants, carcinogens, I don't feed my kids vegetables, so I guess I'm going to stop eating vegetables.
Yes, that's what he said.
Amazing. He also just gives an anecdote about how much better everything became when he did this. We're just going to...
So what? That's all that's available. There are no research projects that can inform on this topic, and neither will there ever be. On the upside, you don't have any data that you can point at either, which is valid or utilitarian or worthwhile entering into any discussion about human nutrition, because it does not exist.
Ignore that. It's an anecdote. Plenty of vegans talk about how when they went vegan and started consuming more plant foods and more vegetables that are apparently so bad for you, they started feeling better.
Yeah, but what happens within 5 years, though? Well, 84% of people that ever try a vegan diet quit within 5 years. 84%. And 90% of those people cite catastrophic health failure born of nutrient deficiency. We know what the feeling good initially is about. It's because when you go on a diet that is vegan, you are likely to be alleviating the problems that you were probably causing yourself hitherto with a standard Western or American diet, which was largely an effector of the Randall cycle in a negative way. And as such, you alleviate that problem and you feel better for the short term until those nutrient deficiencies kick in. Okay, so those are the observations you need to bring to the table. The full story. Not just a partial story. For the first few years, a vegan often reports they feel better than they did when they ate a standard diet, which is not surprising.
So that's the thing, is that most plants will kill most animals. So it's not that some plants are poisonous, some aren't. It's that all plants are poisonous. It's just that certain animals have evolved the ability to defend themselves against specific plants. But if they eat other plants, they will get sick or even die.
What's funny about this part is, and humans aren't one of those animals, apparently. Directly from his...
Correct. It's not apparently. We have the stable isotope records that tell us how human beings have eaten for the last several 100,000 years at least. Slam dunk, unequivocal, actual science. We know the answer. There's nothing apparent about it.
Source that he cites, quote, furthermore, humans have numerous inducible defense systems against mutagenic carcinogens, such as DNA repair, antioxidant defenses, glutathione transferases, and so forth, which may make low doses of mutagens protective in some circumstances.
And he found that people...
That leaves maybe not two entirely on the table still. A qualified, competent, experienced scientist sees that word in there immediately and knows that that's the word that undercuts that entire sentence, making it of no value, worthless, and it might as well be deleted. That's not what we're doing here in science. We're looking for 95% confidence, not maybe.
We'll reverse it. People today are doing this all over the world. People may know of Jordan Peterson, his daughter, Michaela Peterson, who had such severe juvenile rheumatoid arthritis that she had 2 joint replacements of her ankle and I believe her hip when she was 16 years old. She eliminated she went keto first and eliminated out a lot of different toxins and nightshades in particular, and had very, very good results. Then she dropped all the salads as well, just went to pure meat and water diet. Now she's off all medications and she's having kids.
So we have another anecdote shared by...
Okay, yeah, great. Another anecdote. But we have millions of these. Millions. No science because it does not exist. You don't have any either, though, son. That's why this whole debate continues ad infinitum, ad nauseum. If the science were in and we had the answer, there'd be nothing left to debate. But our anecdotes are people thrive long-term, multiple decades on a carnivore diet. There are very few issues that people experience. And the issues that they do experience are normally 100% avoidable, actually, if they get some good advice on how to go carnivore in the first place. Veganism, 84% failure within 5 years, and 90% of those people, catastrophic and sometimes permanent health damage, because it's not a diet that's appropriate for our species, not remotely. On that level, there's nothing further to discuss. Anyone who wants to try and talk about, oh yes, but the science says, needs to come and debate with me. Because I'll tell you what the science says on the topic of heart health outcomes in human beings as that relates to any aspect of human nutrition over any period of time. Here it is. Nothing. That is what the data tells us about that. Not a damned thing. If you want to talk about science, son, come and talk to me about science.
Chaffee. But this time, we know that this anecdote he shared is false. He claimed that Mikhaila Peterson has since removed all medications since going carnivore. This is not true. This was covered in depth by Vegan Gains in this video.
So you have these science.
Oh, right. So what Vegan Gains has had to say about what's happening in Mikhaila Peterson's life is absolutely authority, is it? Richard Burgess wouldn't know his elbow from his anal orifice if I labelled both of those and taught the boy how to read, son. Richard Burgess is an authority now. Classic.
Cyanogenic glycosides, and these exist in things like cassava root, which is a very important root, which we'll talk about. Also, almonds and bitter almonds. They respond to damage, and so once you're chewing an almond or a bitter almond or cassava, that will release this cyanide. So it's normally not in the tissue, just when it's being damaged, right? So this is a defense mechanism. The cassava root, there's bitter and there's sweet. The sweet, or both of them combined, account for the third most important source of calories in the tropics and is the primary source of calories for over 500 million people in the world. So this is a very important source of calories, and it contains cyanide. The bitter cassava will kill you.
Okay, so we don't consume bitter almonds unless they're prepared in a specific way. And we cook cassava. Boiling cassava can remove all or almost all of the cyanide in it if done with sufficient water and
So what?
time. Next.
So we don't have that really as a staple here, but people do eat almonds, and people don't realize that 400 to 800 grams of almonds can be a lethal dose of cyanide in an adult. And yet we give this stuff to kids and sell it in grocery stores, which I think is wild.
So no source was provided for this claim, but let's just pretend it's true.
But you haven't provided any source that provides any evidence for anything you've had to say either. You've shown us your incompetence to read science by putting forward that ridiculous associative mishmash as if it were any kind of science. It isn't.
400 to 800 grams of almonds is around 2,300 to 4,600 calories of almonds. Who is eating this much almonds exactly?
Oh, God, I wish we could get rid of this term calories and this idea that food contains energy. It's just so fundamentally erroneous, the whole concept. It's covered in great detail on my channel if you want to look at the actual science behind that, on my actually science-based channel, run by an actual scientist who understands actual science. Or you could just listen to this boy here who has an opinion.
Now let's go by actual research.
Actual research. Good.
Lethal oral dose of cyanide is about 0.5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So if somebody was 70 kilograms, that would be around 35 milligrams of cyanide. Sweet almonds have about 25.2 milligrams per kilogram of cyanide.
Plus or minus individual variation, technical error of measurement, etc.
So even 1 kilogram or 2.2 pounds of sweet almonds wouldn't be enough for a 70 kilogram individual to hit the lethal dose of cyanide. And for perspective, that is about 1,000 grams of almonds.
You're making a lot of assumptions there, son. Like one of the most primary assumptions that you've just made there is that the only determinant of fatality to toxicology of cyanide is the person's body weight. Nothing else has an impact. Does it not? All right, son, if you say so.
Or 5,790 calories. The next part of his video is...
This is what always amuses me about these arse biscuits, basically, that come online and think they're being ever so clever by bringing up sources of information, sources of literature, sources of data on this, that, and the other thing, and think they're being ever so scientific and clever. No. You're mindlessly regurgitating tables of data and things. You have absolutely no understanding of what underpins any of that, or what its limitations are even. You are incompetent to speak on science, and you should cease doing so today. Or you should come in front of me for a debate. That'll be hilarious. My people will love it. Yours probably will too. They'll think you won. It'll be great. You can let them believe it. My people will know absolutely that I'll crush you.
a lot of fear-mongering over, quote, anti-nutrients in plants, which I've already covered in depth in a video dedicated to discussing anti-nutrients in plants. So we're going to skip this section, but I'll have the video linked in the description.
The protein that's in plants is not bioavailable.
Yeah, so no source for this claim whatsoever. If protein in plants are not bioavailable, then why do we see, when protein is matched between omnivorous and plant-based diets, no difference in muscle strength and mass accrual? Surely if plant protein is not bioavailable, we wouldn't see results like this. And since Chaffee likes anecdotes, what about me? If the plant protein I'm consuming is
Well, I'm not impressed. Remotely.
not bioavailable, why do I get results like this? Why was
Okay, son. Radio.
I able to lose all of my muscle gain from resistance training due to a Crohn's disease flare and then gain it all back by only consuming non-bioavailable protein sources for protein? I'd love
Yeah, I think the word non-bioavailable that Anthony Chaffee chose there, or are not bioavailable, it needs qualification. I'm assuming that he would qualify it, but I'm also assuming that you haven't given him the chance to do that. Neither have you placed that in the context of what was the aim of this speech to that audience at that time.
to hear an answer. And anecdotes aside, if plant protein is not bioavailable, why does this meta-analysis show no difference in soy versus animal protein on gains in muscle mass and strength?
It's unable to inform on cause and effect in any way, shape, or form because it is not a controlled experimental work with enough people over a long enough period of time to derive any meaningful take-home message from whatsoever. In fact, the signal-to-noise ratio is massive, meaning that the findings are actually weak at best anyway. Yeah, it's just an incompetent reading of data, once again, by a buffoon who thinks he knows a whole bunch of stuff that he's got no idea about.
Response to resistance training.
Like if you think about wheat, for example, 80% of the protein in wheat is gluten, and that is completely unavailable to us to be used as protein.
Source for this claim? None?
That's right. You haven't provided any sources of anything either except opinions. You haven't provided a single piece of experimental work which is able to inform on hard outcomes in human beings over any period of time as it relates to any aspect of nutrition, because they do not exist still.
Okay, and here's a source suggesting that wheat gluten is incredibly digestible for humans. Wow, look at that. Sources for claims. Amazing stuff, guys.
So you splash it up there for 3 seconds so we can't even see what it was. You haven't established your posit. You want to talk about a paper that establishes evidence for a claim, then you need to be prepared to defend that paper in depth. Because I bet within 2 minutes I could find several major holes in it. Invalidating holes within 2 minutes, I bet.
And here's a clip of one of the most outrageous things I've ever heard.
Okay, outrageous is an opinion.
Chaffee say.
And so you can get quite a lot of weight gain from eating lectins, especially when you have leaky gut and it gets into your system. And eliminating these sorts of things from your system, all of a sudden people lose a lot of weight. I certainly noticed that. I was just eating vegetables like spinach, kale, broccoli, and just meat. And just by dropping the spinach, kale, and broccoli, I lost 10 kilos in 10 days. And so, it was just came right off me. And I was eating more calories. I was eating much more meat. I started eating.
Nobody ever eats calories, ever.
A lot more meat, a lot more fatty meat. So I probably quintupled my calories.
No, you didn't. You quintupled the amount of food you were eating, Anthony.
But I lost 10 kilos.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. When I did 2 weeks of priming, I tripled my intake of food as so-called measured by the so-called calorie. And I did that for a 2-week period. And I lost, I think it was 12.5 kilos, middle of the range, plus or minus error of measurement, day by day, biological error, etc. From memory, something like that. And it seems to be mostly because of a lowering of the body's inflammatory status, which means it chucks off a bunch of excess water that it's carrying around for the inflammatory process. So you flush all of that out of your system. And also there is a continued oxidation of fat, it seems, because also some fat came off while eating vastly more food than I had been hitherto. So there you go, N=2 anecdotes that say the same thing. Other people will report priming and putting on some weight.
Okay.
This man claims to have simply dropped spinach, kale, and broccoli from his diet, but then probably quintupled his calories. And
Yeah,
then
we heard him.
lost 10 kilograms or 22 pounds.
Yes, we heard him.
Just what? How many calories was he eating prior?
None at all. Nobody ever eats calories. Calories are a measurement of heat energy. That is all they are. They are nothing else. You do not eat those.
For somebody his size, let's just assume that it was 2,500 calories. This would mean he went from 2,500 calories to 12,500 calories and lost 22 pounds. Let's even be hyper charitable and say he was eating 1,000 calories per day, which I don't know how we would be doing that as someone his size, but let's just pretend. This would mean
Why would we do that? Why would we just pretend numbers that we've pulled out of our anal orifice, son? Which is what epidemiology is, by the way.
Went from 1,000 calories per day to 5,000 calories per day and lost 22 pounds.
Yes, I had a similar experience. I didn't eat as much more food as what Anthony's talking about he did. I was about 3 times.
And by the way, he said this all happened within 10 days.
Yes, I did it for 14.
Which makes his story all the more improbable.
Who cares what your opinion is of his story? Can you disprove the facts of what he's just said? No. Were you there? No. So what you can give us on this particular statement is your opinion, which is worthless. You have no credibility to give an opinion, no authority to give an opinion.
I lost 10 kilos in 10 days.
Truly unbelievable. Some of the
Personal incredulity fallacy.
carnivores watching may be coping and saying, oh, well, there's all those carbs in broccoli, kale, and spinach that he dropped. That's why he lost all that water weight.
But that's your guess on what people might say. Who cares or what your guess is of what some people might say?
That weight he lost in 10 days, or most of it, was water. Do I even need to spell out how low in carbohydrates broccoli, kale, and spinach are?
No, because it makes no difference here. That's not what's being argued. That was your straw man that you just set up.
The anecdote is just ridiculous, and in all honesty...
That's your straw man, though. You set it up as ridiculous, and now you're knocking it over like you're something clever. No, we're a bit more advanced than that, son. That's not going to fool us. We have IQs over about 80 over here.
We shouldn't take anything he says seriously about what he experienced on his diet. Anecdotes are already considered unreliable, but I have never heard that somebody had quintupled their calories and lost 22 pounds.
So, personal incredulity fallacy. Because you've never heard of something occurring, it cannot possibly occur. No, son.
Unreal. Let's now move on to a video titled Challenging Dr. Chaffee's Carnivore Diet, The Tough Questions, which, by the way, contains 0 sources in the description. I actually recently
Yeah, but you haven't provided any sources of anything either, son. You think you have. That's what makes this all the more funny. No, son. Not a damned data point. Not one have you provided that supports anything.
Covered in a clip where Chaffee says that a vegan diet is deficient. So
it is. Fact. Again.
Put that up first, and then we'll get into the other claims that I didn't cover in that short.
But, then B12 does not exist. Even the Seventh-day Adventists, who are religiously anti-meat, they say on how to be vegan and vegetarian, hey, B12, you can't get this. They even say you have to supplement. It's something you have to supplement. If you have to supplement, then by definition, your diet is deficient.
So I've been vegan for around 8 years or so, and I've heard from meat eaters and carnivores like this many times that because a vegan diet requires a form of supplementation, like a B12 supplement, it is by definition deficient.
But that's a fact. It doesn't matter whether you like that or not, son. It is a fact, nonetheless.
This is always so confusing to me because you're saying that a vegan diet requires a supplement, and therefore, if a vegan diet that is deficient also comes with a supplement, it's no longer deficient. So if
No, he didn't say that. You said that. And actually, the supplementation of vitamin B12 is a bit more complex than I'm quite sure you would have any understanding of, son. Getting it right. Much more difficult than you might imagine, actually. But that's covered on an actually science-based channel, mine. So,
somebody decides to consume this deficient vegan diet and takes a supplement, what exactly is the problem? I mean, just look at my B12 levels as a vegan.
That tells us nothing about your actual effective B12 status. Again, if you had any credibility in science, you'd understand that. The fact that you don't just points once again to your utter incompetence.
As you can see, not deficient. And here's a paper.
No, false. A B12 test cannot determine whether you are or are not, in effect, clinically deficient of vitamin B12.
Showing the health outcomes of people.
Same deal in a group of people. This cannot inform on the moot at hand as to whether a deficiency exists or not, except in determining whether a person is over or under an accepted threshold, which is, by the way, a consensus opinion and not underpinned by clinical scientific data. Okay?
In regard to B12, when they're vegan and take a B12 supplement, it works. When you say that a vegan diet is deficient because it requires a supplement,
that is correct.
You're admitting that with a supplement, it isn't deficient.
No, that's an extension that you've added. It is not a necessary logical conclusion on the basis of what was actually said. You made that bit up yourself.
My friend, Professor Bill Schindler, who is a professor of anthropology or paleoanthropology and archaeology at the University of Maryland, just retired. He was just over in Sardinia, which is, Mediterranean, and it's the epicenter where he was at, the epicenter of the original blue zone identified of people who were living, very great age and very good health, well over 100. There were a lot of people living over 100.
Actually, in fact, there are very, very poor records in most of these so-called blue zones as to when people definitely really were born. Before we even go any further with the fallacies and falsehoods of the totally debunked so-called blue zones. That's for another day. It's also already covered on my actually science-based channel if people want to go and check that one out. Or if you can't find it on my YouTube offerings, it'll be on the other platform where most of my videos had to go, because YouTube changed the rules and started applying the new rules to videos that didn't break the rules at the time that those videos were posted. So, bad faith actor, we had to move them over there. ODYSEE.com. That's where you find that stuff. Just search for me by name and perhaps use Nutrition Science Watchdog as my handle. And my main channel over there will come up for you.
They were completely independent. They weren't in nursing homes, just, crumbling to dust. They were out there being active adults. And this was famously put in the blue zones as largely plant-based, which is a flat out lie.
Correct. It's false.
He said that not only are they meat-based, they're nearly carnivore, and they're whole animal-based.
So Chaffee claims that the people of Sardinia are mostly carnivore, and his evidence...
No, he didn't say that at all. You said that just now. He was talking about blue zones in general there. Again, you're misquoting him to suit your argument, which is basically a straw man at best.
For this claim is, quote, my friend was in Sardinia and said that he saw them consume a meat-based diet and be nearly carnivore. A very high standard of evidence, I know.
Yeah, but you haven't supplied any evidence of anything either still, son. And here, what we have here, we have evolution of the dietary patterns across nutrition transition in the Sardinian longevity blue zone and association with health indicators in the oldest old. Goodness me, that's a mouthful, isn't it? What we basically have here is an opinion piece. Do we have an experiment here of any kind? Because that's how science is done, with experiment. Okay? This is an ancillary opinion, and as such is worthless. It also contains falsehoods from start to end, demonstrable falsehoods. But that's for another day. Perhaps if you'd like to debate, you can send me your up to 3 references for a debate on any topic that you think the science has established, and I'll tell you to bits. That'll be great and educational for everyone except you, because Dunning-Kruger.
Definitely a higher standard than this paper on dietary patterns in the Sardinian population, showing that they don't actually eat meat daily. Imagine consuming a mostly carnivore diet that is apparently meat-based, but not consuming meat every day. Makes sense.
There is no retinol. There is no vitamin A in plants or fungus, right? It comes in the form of beta carotene, it's carotenoids, right? So say, oh, well, you can turn those into retinol. Well, some people can. About 45% of people do not have the ability to turn beta carotene into vitamin A.
As usual, no source was provided for this claim.
So what? That's still true.
Amazing. Sweet potatoes have about a 13-to-1 beta carotene to retinol conversion ratio. Some people have a 55 to 70% impairment for this kind of conversion, except for very rare cases where it's more. This is where a supplement may be warranted. So with no impairment in conversion, 1 cup of sweet potatoes can result in enough retinol to meet the RDA of 900 micrograms per men. In someone with 60% impairment, 2 cups is enough. And of course, Chaffee provides no evidence of vegans having higher vitamin A deficiency rates than non-vegans. Amazing.
It's because it doesn't exist any more than there is any evidence of anybody else from any other nutritional group having a higher prevalence of anything either.
And here is health outcome data showing that vegans do not have lower vitamin A status.
In fact, there's
according to a test which is unable to actually inform on a person's effective clinical vitamin A status.
Inverse relationship with the amount of saturated fat we were eating from the beginning of the 1900s and the rise in heart disease. Inversely related. In the 1800s, we kept very good records going back hundreds of years. And in the early 1800s, we were eating, far more meat than we were for the next 200 years until, much more recently. And most of that was beef and things like that. And there was no heart disease throughout the entire 1800s.
No heart disease throughout the 1800s? What a bold claim. Did he provide evidence for this?
Did you provide evidence of anything? No, still?
No. We've seen atherosclerosis in 16th century Greenland Inuit mummies and
so what?
Lithuanian mummies from the 18th and 19th century.
So?
and Egyptian mummies spanning from 4,000 to nearly 2,000 years ago. Why
Yeah, and what was it that was probably the likely cause of that? And so?
would Chaffee make such an easily refutable claim? I don't know.
I don't know either.
You know, the other thing on the studies, the other carnivore epiphany I guess I've had lately, you kind of touched on this.
It's about choosing one's words very, very carefully when one is speaking publicly on a topic of fact. And it's very, very easy to make unequivocal statements of fact that are not supportable. The discipline of a scientist is to refrain from doing so, or indeed to word what he or she is saying in such a way as to be unassailable in that regard if one wants to claim authority and profess and posit to have any answer on any given topic. This is just conversational stuff in a YouTube video. Do you see Anthony Chaffee writing a research thesis right now where he would have to support every statement he makes with some form of reference material? No. This is not the format for dealing with science because, well, what we've seen today is yet another example of an individual, you son, who is completely incompetent to read or talk about science publicly. The YouTube platform is largely an entertainment, pseudo-education format. If you want to demand research publications from people, you better get some qualifications, become an academic, and start assessing students in your own right. Until then, you are a boy with an attitude problem, frankly, an ego problem, patently, and Dunning-Kruger dripping from every pore. It is time for you to front up to a scientist, that'll be me, and then we can have a lesson on what science is about and what it isn't about. My email address is on the About tab, in case it's too difficult for you to find the About tab on the front page of my YouTube channel. It's there.
You can't eat something for 2 million years, survive as a species, and thrive as a species if you are not already biologically evolved to it and designed to eat it, or you have then become optimized to it. It just doesn't work like that. That's just not how biology works. And so I've heard this argument from Simon Hill, which I just thought was insane. He's like, oh,
well, nothing Simon Hill says is backed by anything other than that boy's arrogant opinion as well. He's another absolute waste of space.
Oh yeah, well, I'm not arguing that people have been eating meat for 2 million years, but it's probably not optimal, it's probably suboptimal. This thing that we've never eaten before in human history, that's definitely better. Because, some study said so. Like, I just don't care.
There are no studies that said that. Some of them might be theologically propagandizing, but there is no science out there that can support that posit.
I just don't care. I just don't care. You don't understand biology from a fundamental level.
So we have Chaffee literally saying he doesn't care what studies show that a particular food is healthy.
There are no studies that show any such thing still.
Or even a particular food is unhealthy because of evolution, though. We've adapted to eat meat, though.
Well, that's a fact.
And meat is healthy, though, because of these things.
That bit you added.
I'm not going to be spending too much time on this point because there is a debate coming out soon where Anthony Chaffee is sufficiently pressed on this point, which is fundamentally based in him thinking being biologically adapted to consume a certain food necessarily means that...
Why don't you come and have a debate with a competent scientist? Me. Try your little games with me, sunshine. I'll be awaiting your email, which I know I won't get from you.
Consuming it is beneficial for living into old age, when in reality, biological adaptation is more beneficial for getting us to reproductive age, not necessarily...
Oh, antagonistic pleiotropy. We've covered that in depth on my channel as well. It also makes a number of false assumptions. The only goal of a human life is to procreate and pass on our genes, after which we're now useless? Nope. That doesn't stand up even to the most basic cursory logical refutation either. Perhaps you'd like to debate antagonistic pleiotropy with me.
Living well off into old age. This debate may or may not be uploaded at the time at which I've uploaded this video. If the debate has been made public by the time I upload this video, I'll have it linked in the pinned comment. But yeah, let's just be clear. The man literally said, I don't care, in response to rigorous papers that
There are no rigorous papers.
contain results directly conflicting with his worldview.
No, they don't. They are an opinion in and of themselves. They are not experimental works of science that prove cause and effect. Still, they are poor quality, mostly. They are uncontrolled, universally. And don't tell me adjustment is control. It's not. It's fabrication. And you are an incompetent buffoon, son.
About red meat and long-term health. Amazing. Just who cares about studies and data?
Because there aren't any. So who cares what you think it should say?
Solution though. All right, guys. Well, that's the end of this video. There are so many things said by Anthony that I did not cover in this video, and there's certainly room for a part 2, maybe even a part 3, or even a part 4.
So here's the bonus. The bonus at the end of this video was me once again issuing the challenge to this boy here to come and front me for a debate about any aspect of human nutrition science. He should propose a moot, which may or may not need tidying up to make it debatable. There will be some rules for such a debate, and we'll do it live on camera. How's that? Let's see if he's got the kahunas. Let's see if he's got the confidence of his conviction to front up to someone who actually can deal with his nonsense. Because a medically trained individual is not. Now, most of what Anthony Chaffee has to say is correct on most things, actually, as it turns out. What Anthony doesn't have is the experience in the disciplines of communicating in an unassailable and correct fashion according to the disciplines of science, which I do have. So bring it on, son. The rest of you, let's hear the rest of his summary, and then we'll say thank you for being here and see you next time when someone else will be wrong on the interwebs, because it doesn't look like slowing down. Here it is.
Responding to Anthony Chaffee. He says a lot of questionable things. If
So do you, son.
Part 2, 3, or 4 is something you guys would want to see, please let me know in the comments below.
I think they'd probably sooner see you front up to me for a debate, son.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to help make videos like this more possible and help me, put videos like this together, which, take a lot of time and are very in-depth, please consider supporting.
They're not in-depth. They're just nonsense. They're your opinions, son, based on nothing.
On Patreon, you can get early access to content and one-on-one messaging through Patreon. If you don't know, I do have a book going over most, if not all, of the anti-vegan arguments you can hear online.
Are the so-called debunkments of any better quality than what you've provided here today? I doubt it. I doubt it.
I get that as well. That'll be linked in the pinned comment. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Well, I hope to see you soon, Danny, for a debate. Do you have the guts? Bring it. All right, rest of you, bye. See you then.